The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is July 24th, 2014. That's right, I am back live tonight. I took a few nights off. As I said last week, I am in the process of moving my bat cave from one location to another, and that does take some time, and sometimes I will be taking off over the next few weeks here and there. When I can go live, I will, which will be most of the time. Once in a while, I will have to take a night off here or there to get my stuff done. I am only one man, and there are only 24 hours in the day. I wish there was like 48 in the day. That way I could actually get more things accomplished. But anyway, that being said, I have a jam-packed show for you tonight. Jam-packed informational broadcast. What am I going to get into? Well, first hour we're going to cover the slaughter in Gaza again. You're not going to hear me rant and rave about it. I did 2 broadcasts last week where I was ranting and raving about it. I think this time you should hear from former IDF soldiers themselves and survivors of the Holocaust, what they have to say about what's going on in Gaza and what Israel is doing. Because if you watch television, all you're going to see is pro-Israel crap. And the news media has been showing a little bit more about the Palestinian side. But they still push the propaganda, and a lot of Americans here are just brainwashed, which, by the way, we're also going to get into in hour 2, how Americans are brainwashed and how that actually happens. That's a little bit more in detail, so we'll spend hour 2 going over that, and I got some audio clips I want to play, which I've played before, but it's imperative that you all hear them again. I couldn't go over this information enough with you, so we're going to get into that. But first, in hour 1 here, I want you to hear from Holocaust survivors, people that survived Nazi Germany and their tyrannical control over Europe. And look, I know there's a lot of people out there that say the Holocaust didn't happen and they, blah, 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 blah. I know that perhaps Israel and people that, scholars that work with, via AIPAC, Zionism, whatever their roots are, whatever their cause is, money, political ideology, whatever. There are people out there that have skewered facts and things, and Israel's government does use the Holocaust as an excuse to do what it does to the people of Gaza, which is the same thing that was done to the Jews back in the late 30s and the 40s, and all the other people, by the way, that were rounded up in the concentration camps. As I said before, I don't have a problem believing that 6 million Jews were rounded up, considering something like 21 or 22 million people were rounded up all throughout Europe. I don't have a problem believing that 6 million of them could have been of, the Jewish faith. I don't have a problem believing that at all. So it's also not told that we killed a lot of them ourselves in bombing raids. They were slave labor in a lot of the factories and stuff that we blew up. So history itself has been skewered on both sides. Things have been used. But the event itself, where people were rounded up and put into camps, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it the Holocaust, which actually means fiery sacrifice. You want to call it whatever, the roundup, whatever, the police state, martial law, 1938, whatever the hell you want to label, actually it goes back even earlier than that. But whatever you want to label the event that took place where they were rounding everybody up throughout Europe, first in Germany, and then as they conquered each country, they would come and round people up and put them in the camps and use them as slave labor. Some were killed immediately, but most of them, I would say at least probably 65 to 70% of them were used as slave labor and worked to death. Others were used to experiment on by people like Dr. Mengele and his horde. So there's just a lot of stuff that's not brought to the table. It's dumbed down to the very base level. They get rid of most of the important information and they just say, oh my God, it was the Jews that were rounded up. And then people come in and go, no, that's not true at all. Here are all these numbers. And then creates this infighting where it's one choice or the other. Again, it's this faux illusion or this illusion of faux choice, I call it, where you have to either take one side where you believe the Holocaust exactly as they tell you it happened, or you're a denier. You can't have this intermediate gray area where you're actually, okay, yeah, it happened, but some of the stuff that you're saying, you're tweaking and you're not telling the truth because, again, we killed a lot of people in bombing raids. That's not popular. They don't want to tell you that. The veterans of World War II bombed people that were in slave labor camps. They don't want you to know about that, and other such things like, we gave 20,000 prisoners of war to the Soviets at the end of the war. Oh yeah, you want to read a good book, go read Target Patton. That's a great book. It gets into some of the hidden history of World War II, why Patton was assassinated. Yes, I said assassinated. I've had the author on twice. Go back in my archives and look it up. Go over to federaljack.com, type in Target Patton, and both interviews will come up. In fact, I believe I made a special page with both interviews on the same page with links to both interviews anyway. So go look it up, Target Patton. History is definitely different than what you've been told. And in order to understand what's going on today, we have to go back to World War II. So go do your research. I could sit here for 2 hours pontificating and bloviating, but I still wouldn't get out everything that I wanted to get out. And look, let's be honest, a 2-hour broadcast, or even an hour covering one subject and an hour covering another, is not enough time to consider yourself an expert after you hear it. So you have to go out and do your research. You must. Don't just listen to me and go, well, Popeye said it, so he must be right. No, don't think that. Take what I say as, truth, but don't just take it as gospel and run with it. What I mean by that is don't think I would lie to you, but also don't not go out and do the research. I want you to do the research. I want you to go do the research yourself. As I've said many times, you could lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I could sit here and tell you all this stuff, and I'm going to play some audio and stuff for you tonight and point things out. But if you're not paying attention, if you're not actually doing the homework yourself, you're not going to learn anything. You're listening. At that point, it becomes a 2-hour informational broadcast where you're just listening to whatever I say and going, yeah, he's right because he's Popeye. And at that point, I'm no better to you than the mainstream media is. Because the mainstream media comes on and gives you canned garbage or whatever they want to put out, and to the people that believe it go, okay, well, the media said it, so it must be true, right? Well, it's the same thing. Don't believe anything I tell you to be gospel or anything any of the other hosts on this network tell you to be gospel. Believe us because we've been proven to not lie and to tell the truth, but always verify. Like Kennedy said, trust but verify. So you can trust us, but don't just trust us and blindly trust us. Trust us because you can see that when we talk to you about a subject, and this goes for all the hosts in this network, there's no crappy hosts on this network. Every one of them is awesome, including the boss man and the boss lady. Okay? And no matter what topics are talked about, it's brought to you in a fashion that is truthful. Okay? So you don't, at least you have that going. At least, I want you to look at it like that. Like, yes, respect us and respect the information that we give you, based on the fact that we're not liars. But do not just take it as gospel and go, well, Chris Gio said it, or Popeye said it, or Joe Joseph said it, or Kev Baker said it, or whoever else said it. No. Take notes. I actually urge you guys to sit with a pad and a pen during the broadcast and take notes about what we're talking about. That way you can go verify and do your homework later in your own time, whenever. And then you can say, oh, wow, he was right. Okay. Oh, okay. And then that gives us a little more credibility. That's where our credibility should come from. Our credibility should not come from just because I have a radio show and I'm on Truth Frequency. No, the credibility should come from you listening, taking notes, and going and doing the homework yourself and verifying. Trust, but verify, like Kennedy said. Anyway, I want to get into these clips I have because I have about 16 minutes and I want to fit both of these in the first half here. And in the second half of the first hour, I have, it's pretty much going to take up the whole second 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes of the broadcast here, the second segment. And it's two IDF soldiers speaking the truth about what goes on, what they experienced during the, I think they were in 2006. You'll hear it. It was either 2006 or 2008. You'll hear it in the video. And there's two separate, they're two soldiers, so it's not just one. It's two separate soldiers. They give their full names and everything. They're on camera, and I'll try to find the YouTube link for it, but I'll give you the name, at least the name of the video on air, so you can look it up on YouTube and you can pass the link around yourself. But you're going to hear these two former IDF soldiers talk about what they did, what they saw, what they witnessed, and why they don't agree with it. So a little bit of truth from actually people that were on the ground instead of the propaganda masters like CNN and all these other mouthpieces, the IDF's mouthpiece and the rest of these people. Anyway, I want to get to the clip. So before we get into the IDF soldiers, we're going to get into two they're two Holocaust survivors. So I guess two former prisoners of war, prisoners of the camps, I guess you could say, whatever you want to call it. They were survivors of the Nazi human roundup, if you don't like the word Holocaust, okay? Anyway, I want you to hear what they have to say about what's going on in Gaza. I want you to hear what they have to say over what these people go through. Now, the first one is a lady, and you'll hear her story. The audio isn't the greatest, because I got it from YouTube, and I tried to clean it up a bit, but it is what it is. It's the only copy I could find of this interview with this lady, so I'll play with the audio levels while it's airing here, try to give you the best sound. Anyway, here we go. Holocaust survivor explains how Nazism is the exact same thing as Zionism. Here we go.
The past few weeks have seen violence erupt once again between Israel and Palestine.
Oh, by the way, this is from 2009. So, you can obviously, over the past couple of years, these events, the invasion into Gaza or the attack on Gaza, whatever you want to call it, every couple of years, as the Israelis call it, mowing the grass over there. Really disgusting the way they look at it. But those people have been dehumanized, just like our soldiers were for Iraq and Afghanistan. Anyway, back to the video. The reason I pointed out that it was 2009 is it's 2014, and when you listen to what she's saying and what they're talking about, it's the same thing that you hear in the news today. Well, Hamas, if they stop the rocket fire, we'll stop dropping 2,000-pound JDAMs.
And the high tensions engendered by the conflict have caused a large degree of polarization amongst both communities. Many now simply view the conflict as being between Arab and Jew. However, I went along to an exhibit on Palestinian art depicting the occupation to meet one woman who certainly doesn't fit into that narrow stereotype. Suzanne Weiss is a 62-year-old Jewish survivor of the Holocaust who now lives in Canada. Firmly opposed to injustice of any kind after having experienced firsthand the horrors of the Nazi occupation, she's a leading member of the organization Not in Our Name, dedicated to voicing Jewish opposition to Zionism. She's a strident supporter of the Palestinian cause and has attracted controversy for comparing the situation in Gaza to the infamous Warsaw Ghetto.
What are your memories of the Holocaust?
Well, when I was 2 years old, my mother was taken away from me and sent to a concentration camp. And she died in Auschwitz. And I was put with the underground movement, and I was hidden in a farming village in Auvergne. And when the war ended, I was told that my mother could not come home and she had died. And I was also told that my father had suffered a mortal wound due to a bombing of his prisoner camp in Germany. From that point, I felt very alone, very lost, and I had no one else. I had no other family.
And what similarities do you see between the Warsaw Ghetto and what's happening in Palestine at the moment?
The methods of Hitler are very much, in my opinion, in evidence in in the Gaza ghetto. There's a big wall that envelops the Gaza ghetto. This is very similar to what happened to the Jews. We had, first of all, 440,000 Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. In the Gaza Ghetto, there's 1.5 million. People were dying of starvation. And there was no medical access. It's the same thing in the Gaza Ghetto. They can't get out of the checkpoints as in the Warsaw Ghetto. And Jews were humiliated, forced to undress at checkpoints. The same thing as the Gaza Ghetto. They are humiliated, forced to crawl undressed. They killed people indiscriminately. And that's the same thing that's happening with the Gaza Ghetto. Children, many children are just killed, indiscriminately. If they throw a rock, they're shot.
When did you first become involved in this Israel-Palestine conflict?
The question was for me, would a country just for the Jews actually stop anti-Semitism? And I thought about it, and I thought to myself, well, how would they be able to stop anti-Semitism if they stole the land, if they took the land from other people?
Do you worry that some Palestinian supporters might conflate the term Jew with Zionist, and so what's essentially a political problem turns into a racial or religious one?
Zionism is a political ideology. And the fact is the Palestinians have nothing against the Jews. They have something against Zionism. And the whole world should have something against Zionism. Now, I belong to an organization called Not in Our Name. We don't want Zionist policies to be done in the name of Jewish people. We need to have the Jews defend the Palestinians because of what happened to the Jews themselves. There are two kinds of Jews that came out of the Holocaust. One who said, never again for the Jews. And the other who said, never again for humankind.
Many people blame the Palestinians for the violence, and some would even cite this as a major difference between the situation with the Jews in Germany and Poland and between what's going on in Palestine. How would you respond to this?
Are we going to blame the Jews for fighting back in Warsaw? We had the Warsaw Uprising. Young people who were fighting with stones, with anything they could against, the attackers. In Palestine, they have a right to defend themselves.
So what are your hopes for the future?
My hopes is that the Palestinians are victorious. The Holocaust must not rest as a memory exclusively for Jewish people. It must be an impulse to the struggle against racism and violence, against the persecuted throughout the world, including and especially Palestine. May the spirit of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising triumph in Gaza.
What a powerful lady. What a powerful message. Right from someone that survived what happened all those years ago. And what did she say? There were two types of people that came out of that event. The ones that said never again for the Jews, and then the others that said never again for humanity. See, there can be lessons learned from history, ladies and gentlemen. What do I say all the time? We need to get our humanity back. She was saying the exact same thing I said. Again, a survivor of that horrific event, okay, and that horrific time period, and here you hear her speaking common sense and not saying, we should do this again to another set of different people. That's the truth. That's not the propaganda. That's the truth. Okay, let's get to the next one because we only got a few minutes left here in this segment. Here's a second Holocaust survivor speaking out against Zionism and what's going on in Gaza.
I was 9 when Hitler came to power, but I was about 10 months in Auschwitz. And I learned a lot about the doctrines of a fascist state. The lesson I took from my stay in Auschwitz was anybody belonging to the Jewish people is not allowed to behave ever like our perpetrator, the people who did the thing to us. Look, I think why I have a certain right to be proud of being of Jewish origin is because the Jews were the pioneers of interhuman ethics. And the Jewish idea of how to treat a foreigner, how to treat a servant, which is in the Old Testament, was taken up by nobody less than Jesus Christ, who was the last of the great Jewish prophets. The prophets in the whole tradition wanted to stress and to stress the ethical content of Judaism. And so there is reason enough to be proud. And what is happening now in Israel towards the Palestinians is exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. They treat them like vermin. They talk about them in terms, I mean, like, for instance, the chief of staff of the Israeli army recently, the Palestinians are a cancerous growth. I mean, that type of talking is exactly the opposite, and it's actually like Nazi talking. That's what was said about me when I was a Jewish boy in Germany under the Nazis. You know, when the Nazis gassed the Jews, the world was silent. Now, the world is silent while the Jews or the Israelis harass, humiliate, and steal away land from the Palestinians. And the world is silent. And I want to awake the world. Because any criticism on the policies of Israel is hampered and made impossible by a terrible trick and crime of Israeli propaganda, that any criticism on the politics of Israel comes out, is induced by anti-Semitic feelings. And our main purpose is to show to the world that we are Jews, and we are conscious Jews, and we want to show that you must criticize Israel if you at all want anything good for the Jews in the world, because what Israel is doing is destroying the Jewish world and the Jewish heritage.
He's right. And again, powerful truth coming from someone that, go ahead, try to call them an anti-Semite. Try to call them a self-hating Jew. Come up with whatever label you'd like. And I'm speaking to the people that will come out and speak rhetoric and garbage and propaganda. Southern Poverty Law Center, the ADL, and all those groups. You can call these people what you want. To the people that support Israel blindly, you can call these people what you want. But the truth is, they're survivors, and they're speaking truth to power. And the reason it makes you uncomfortable is because it is true. And it takes you out of your comfort zone. Because you'd rather live in your little preconceived bubble than pop it and face the real world outside. That's just two people. Wait, because in a minute we go to break, and on the other side of that 3 minutes when we come back, I'm going to immediately, I'll bring it in from break, and then I'm going to go to the clips for time purposes. I'm just going to let the whole clip play so you can hear it. You're going to have a whole segment of two IDF soldiers telling you their experiences, what it was like when they were actually serving, what they witnessed, the racism towards the Palestinian people. And what better of a place to get your information from? You just heard from two survivors of the Holocaust, the German police state roundup, right? Telling you they don't agree with what's going on, and that what's going on is exactly what happened to the people in the 30s that the Nazis rounded up. And then, coming up on the other side of the break, two IDF soldiers, former IDF soldiers. There's a lot more of them that speak out about this than you know. It's just hidden from you. Stay tuned. And as always, do your research. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, getting right back into it, I'm going to play some more evidence for you, debunking the propaganda that you see coming out, screaming that, oh, poor Israel, and those evil Palestinians, they should all be wiped off the map. Now, I ranted about it twice last week, as I said. It's in the archives and over at federaljack.com. Israel to the Woodshed, Part 1 and Part 2. Tonight, this is almost like Part 3. And they're being taken to the woodshed by, not by a radio show host, but in the first segment by two Holocaust survivors, and now by two former IDF soldiers. Here we go. A little bit of truth.
Alternate Focus interviews Akai Sharon and Noam Kayut, both veterans of the Israeli Defense Forces. All young Israelis, male and female, with few exceptions, are required to serve 2 to 3 years of active military duty in the Israeli Defense Forces. Sharon and Kayut served during the Second Intifada, a 4-year-long bloodbath that claimed the lives of over 3,000 Palestinians and 950 Israelis. After thorough introspection, these young men have chosen to speak out about their experiences as self-described brutal occupiers of a disputed land. And Sharon and Kayut are not alone. They are members of a new forum for young Israeli Defense Forces veterans called Breaking the Silence. Now a worldwide exhibition, Breaking the Silence features photo and art displays and live speeches. Now, Sharon and Kayut share their stories.
Most of the missions that my unit was given and carried out were arrest operations, search operations, going into taking over cities or towns or villages, of course in the nighttime. And sometimes you would continue in the same place for a few days, searching, going one house to the other, searching them, taking over houses as observation points, or arresting people. And that's your routine. My routine was, or our routine was, that we never knew where we're going to be from one minute to the other. One night we could be in Nablus, the next night we could be in Gaza, the next night we could be in Hebron. And at a certain point you just lose track of where you are, who you are, and what you're doing, because you disrupt people's lives on a daily basis. And for me, that was the most, I think when I look at it today, when I reflect on it today, as someone who couldn't do that during your service, because you can't really live in a, denial way of life where you can't look at what you're doing, you can't really reflect on it. But when I reflect on it today from this perspective, I can say that that was probably for me the deepest example of corruption. Not the extreme cases where there was shooting or stuff like that, but just thinking that there were hundreds of thousands of families that couldn't have one peaceful night of sleep in their homes. I mean, who in today in the USA, in Israel, and anywhere else would be willing to live like that? Not knowing if at 2 o'clock in the morning 20 soldiers will take over your house for a week. Not knowing, sitting in your living room and suddenly hearing smashing on the wall, and there is a hole in the wall, and suddenly 20 soldiers come to visit. And for me that was routine.
In the newspaper I saw an article about confiscation, car keys confiscation. When you detain car to enforce curfew, when you detain cars because they just passed the line that close to a checkpoint, whatever. And it's not the article and the soldier that brought out more or less 100 car keys and brought it to the press, but the response of the spokesman, of the IDF, the spokesman of the IDF, that said, this is an extreme case, a rotten apple, it will be checked, examined, and won't happen again. And now, I gave the order to take Palestinian car keys and to detain cars hundreds of times in my unit. I saw in the West Bank boxes full of car keys and IDs that were taken and were supposed to be returned, and then I know my father read the newspaper before me, and I know that he believes. I mean, he's from a different generation where things maybe were better, or when people could believe the system, and he really thinks that this is an extreme case that won't happen again. And for me, it was a point of understanding that I'm not backed for what I did. And I didn't do it for fun. I got my orders. I thought it was okay. I thought I was a part of a system that protects Israel from terror attacks. And then I understand that it's just a game of keeping information inside and not letting anybody know. And how can you criticize? How can you ask questions? And that was maybe one of the first times that I asked what's going on here.
One time when we finished an operation in Nablus, and it was really destructive. We were 5 or 6 days straight in Nablus with a lot of IDF forces, tanks, and APCs, and it was very destructive. I mean, the whole infrastructure of the city was torn up. There was a lot of houses that were either damaged or even destroyed, and there was a lot of shooting. Mostly by the IDF into the city. And when we got out of there, the first thing that happened when we left the city, got back to the army barrack, was I heard a radio newsflash, which happens every hour in Israel. And it was going like, IDF forces left Nablus after a search and arrest operation, found this and that. And that's it. And I think that even then, I suddenly realized my parents are now sitting at home, they're listening to the radio, and they're sure that here we are, their heroes, their son, they sent, found weapons and ammunition and did this and that and so important things to defend this country, but they don't know the truth. They don't know that 99% of what we did there was destroy people's property, destroy their lives, but no one told them that. And I think, like Noam, when he just realized what where the truth is and where it's going, today I can say that was one time that I really started to think of how the reality is being kept, under the surface, hidden from the public.
You hear the radio or news and TV saying IDF forces return fire to sources of fire. Now you know that we're shooting everywhere. You know that there is no such thing in daylight, sources of fire in urban areas, and
in nighttime.
You know that you can't really, from a barrack far away, you can't really see most of the time the exact place you're shooting in, and that sources of fire, which as a soldier you know that it's just a title, good for the news, but and this dissonance, we didn't hear it while serving.
I want to give you one example of something that we've exposed also in the press in Israel and in foreign press a few months ago about a revenge attack that was launched by the IDF after one night in February 2002. Two terrorists from the Islamic Jihad attacked an IDF checkpoint and killed 6 IDF soldiers. The same night, the Chief of Staff, the Minister of Defense, not some sergeant at a checkpoint, you know, this is policy right from the top, decided to launch a revenge raid against Palestinian officers, some of them just traffic officers, all around the West Bank and Gaza. The next day, 15 Palestinian officers were dead, were reported dead. And we spoke with 5 different soldiers and officers in 2 different units that were part of these raids and part of the attacks on 4 different checkpoints in different areas, geographically had no connection whatsoever to the place that was attacked by the night on the IDF checkpoint. No connection. One was in Nablus, one was near Ramallah, and they just attacked, and the orders were just go there, shoot to kill. And in the briefing by the commanders, by the high-ranking commanders, commanders of units, brigade commanders, they were told that this is revenge. We are going to revenge the blood of our soldiers. So when you ask me where it comes from, this was not some spontaneous 19, 20-year-old kid that lost his mind, that you know, went out of control for a second and slapped someone. This was policy. People sat down in offices, convenient, comfortable offices, and decided to kill people as revenge. And the next day, 15 people were reported dead that had no connection whatsoever to the attack on the IDF. So when we have to, and we exposed this. And then, you know, we weren't expecting something dramatic to change, because when people ask me, don't you think something should happen? Of course I think something should happen. But do you really think that the Israeli public or someone will be brave enough to say that the Minister of Defense has to be investigated? That the Chief of Staff has to be investigated? This is not a 19, 20-year-old or even a lieutenant that should be investigated. This is the system. This is the government. This is the policy. The story behind Breaking the Silence and what it's trying to do is that one day in March 2004, a young guy, a month before his discharge, woke up in the morning and found out that he can't look at himself in the mirror. That guy's name was Yehuda Shaul. He's the founder of Breaking the Silence. And he started to talk with his friends, with people that were his soldiers, his commanders, especially about Hebron. He served 14 months in Hebron in the Second Intifada. And that evolved into a exhibition of pictures taken by soldiers, not photographers, not journalists, just pictures that, you know, 18, 19-year-olds took for memories. And we took that out of photo albums, presented over 60 of them with over 60 soldiers giving video testimonies about their Hebron service. And that evolved from there to what it is today, a much bigger group of soldiers that served all around the occupied territories as conscripts or as officers in the Second Intifada. And we've interviewed over 300, mostly discharged, some still in service, soldiers in the IDF. And the message, or what we're trying to do with all this, is when we were discharged, the first thing, the fundamental thing that we all felt was the amazing distance or gap of information between what is really going on in the occupied territories, what we're really doing over there, and what is known back home to our parents, to our neighbors, to our public figures and leaders, what is told by the press, what is told by the IDF, And we felt a moral obligation as much as a social obligation as people who grew up in Israel, did their military service, who love their country and are very, very concerned about how we will look tomorrow, how we will raise our children tomorrow, because we don't want to see ourselves anywhere else. And out of that concern, we felt the moral obligation of bringing that information, the true stories of what we're doing in the occupied territories, to the public and raising a true public debate on all platforms. Press, politicians, everywhere you can think of, about the real corruption, the moral corruption that is happening in the occupied territories, the price of sending more and more generations to be occupiers.
Breaking the silence, try to fight a code of silence which has many aspects. First of all, and the most important one as we see it, is the personal one. When you stand in a post or in a checkpoint, and I commanded Kalandia checkpoint between Jerusalem and Ramallah, where almost 3,000 Palestinians cross every day, and your job, even if you don't want to do it, you stop people from living the life that they should have. You take their freedom to go to work, you take their freedom to go to university, and many times, even if you don't want to do it, you humiliate people, you make them stand in line for hours, and when you go back home after a month of doing it, you have a weekend break, you don't come home to your girlfriend or to your mother and say, hey, the day before yesterday I saw somebody more or less your age, mommy, and I let her wait in the sun for 5 hours because I didn't have a permission to let her pass. I mean, that daily life of occupation, of controlling people, is the first aspect of the silence code. Breaking the silence is a personal process. It's something, first of all, it's not an easy thing to look at yourself in the mirror and see what you really have done, and the other side, it's a very good feeling to feel a hero, to talk about the fights, the times that you were fighting terrorists and that you saw them, but realizing the damage for the population, realize the hatred that you've created is a hard thing. And when we call people friends, when we have telephones from units in the army and we start calling to people, most of them say, we kind of agree with what you're doing, some agree more, some less, but leave me alone. I mean, I've served, I've done it, I've left the country for a year to forget about it, I'm back here, just let go. And so it's not that easy to get people to talk, even if they agree with the total idea. But we've, as Avichai said, we've interviewed over 300 soldiers, and you need to understand that's not a 1 hour interview, it's or TV interview. Someone tells you about 2 years or 3 years out of his life.
It's important to understand the two different aspects or two different types of testimonies that we've collected until now. In the first few months, most of the testimonies that we exposed were testimonies on the routine, daily brutality and individual or group corruption that happens, humiliation, abuse, theft, looting, things that for Israelis mostly, but I think for any person that wants to deny, can say rotten apples, extreme cases, people that broke the law, broke regulations, and should be convicted or prosecuted. And it sometimes doesn't even matter that you tell them, well, these are stories about units, about hundreds or thousands of soldiers. And that was something that we were exposing for a long time. And the last campaign that we did was a massive collection of testimonies on policies, procedures, orders, things that can't be very easily swept under the rug and called rotten apples because they are the system. And the main issue that we were addressing in this campaign were the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement in Israel are classified. They, in this intifada, are not even written down. even though in past times the IDF used to issue or distribute pocketbooks with the rules of engagement in the occupied territories to every conscript and reservist. In this intifada, not only didn't they distribute this, it is all passed down orally. There is no document written down that is passed down to the officers in the field or the soldiers. And we have decided that, especially because the most dominant thing or dramatic thing that has happened in the Second Intifada is the casualties, is that people are being killed. And children, regular people, innocent people are being killed. And it has been much more violent on both sides, both on the Israeli side with the suicide bombers, and both on the Palestinian side with all the actions that are being done by the IDF. And we've exposed a massive collection of those. I think for me the one that sticks out the most is an officer from an elite unit telling us about his experiences in Rafah. And his testimony is very, very long, so I won't say it all, but he talks about two main issues. One is the demolition of houses, and he describes how in the briefing they were told that the procedure is you don't go into Rafah on foot, because it was right after the APCs blew up. If you remember, that was in the summer of 2004, and it was very hectic, and you couldn't walk by foot, so you come with APCs, tanks, and bulldozers. D9 Caterpillar bulldozers, giant monsters. And before you even say something to the family that you're going to take their house, before you do anything, the D9, the bulldozer, digs 8 meter deep ditch, surrounding 360 degrees, surrounding the house. Then he punches a hole. You don't say anything to the family, you just punch a hole into one of the walls, and then the APC comes right up to the family's home, and you lower the ramp, and the soldiers go in. And I was asking him, who's deciding which houses? And then he describes to me how they.
I'm going to pause it for a second. Those Caterpillar D9 bulldozers are the same ones that ran over Rachel Corrie, an American, and our government did nothing.
Demolish, how they destroy every house in that area that bothered their observation, that might be threatening, everything. And I asked him, who decides what to destroy? And he says, well, the officers in the field. And you have to understand, these could be lieutenants, 21-year-old lieutenants, decide what to destroy and what not to destroy. And then when I ask him, and no one told you criteria of what you can and what you can't. I mean, if the officer decides that he doesn't like, I don't know, a yellow house, and the house is yellow. Exactly the words that I used. And he says, well, if he doesn't like yellow, he can destroy it. And it's that easy. And I think for me, that was an amazing. It's still something that I carry every day, because it's exactly how the procedures, how the policy are so corrupt from the start, that when they are carried out in the field, the amazing power that you have as a 19, 20-year-old soldier carrying out these policies, these procedures on the field, are just so tragic, or are disastrous.
First, I'll give you a quote my Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel that said that the public opinion in the U.S. is the most powerful weapon that the IDF has, or that Israel has. And I think in this case he's right. And I think that the public opinion here and society here immunes us and enable us to do many things that in my opinion are bringing to our social destruction. And I can give you another extreme example, which a soldier that Avichai interviewed, right? One of us interviewed, and he's in a unit, that engineer unit, they're actually, what they're doing is to blow up things. Bridges, houses, and the IDF didn't do them at the beginning of that intifada. The first time they used them was 9/11. 10 minutes after the airplane hit the tower, the first airplane hit the tower, they were on their way to Jenin to blow up houses. Why is that? I can tell you what he says, the soldier that was interviewed. The big brother wasn't looking, wasn't watching. So that's how much things are connected. And I think we realized after the second campaign that after the campaign of the rule of engagement and the systematic reasons for innocent casualties, we realized that it was well publicized, but it didn't bring up any real debate in society. And because there are many reasons. The most powerful one, I think, is these are things that you can't criticize. I mean, you can't classify as rotten apple. It's hard for society to face. And I think we realized that there is a bigger game going on, that we're not the only player in this game, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
I think just to add one thing to know that the public opinion of the United States is, as he said, something that enables us to continue this reality. And just like we're doing back home, trying to force sometimes this truth, the stories, onto the Israeli public so they'll be aware of them, is exactly what we came here to do, is to bring this to the homes of the American society, Jews, Americans, and all Americans, to tell them this is what is really going on. It's about time that you know what you're enabling.
Very powerful message. Again, two former IDF soldiers. You can look up the video on YouTube yourself. I suggest you watch it, spread it. It's called Burning Conscious Israeli Soldiers Speak Out. Just type in Israeli Soldiers Speak Out. It'll pop up.
This is Sparta!
Speaking Truth to Power 101. I don't have to do it myself. I'll let history's witnesses do it for me. It's more powerful that way. We'll be right back. 3 short minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It's July 24th, 2014. We are back live tonight, and if you missed the first hour, I guess you could consider it Israel to the Woodshed Part 3 in the first hour, and I really didn't have to take them to the woodshed. I actually allowed Jews, I guess you could say, if you want to break it down into the base level thinking that the media tries to push across to your brain, Jews, which is just really people that follow the Jewish faith, but people that were survivors of the Holocaust, of Jewish faith, we'll say, woodshedded them in the first segment, and in the second segment, Israeli citizens themselves, former soldiers of the IDF. I didn't have to say anything. And they even explain how it's a trick to use the term anti-Semite, anti-Semitism to try to push off any legitimate criticism of Israel, which is something that's been said multiple times by people that try to criticize not the Israeli people, but the people that live in the country, but the government that runs the country, which is the same thing that happens here. But when you criticize our current tyrant-in-chief, you're called a racist. If Hillary gets in, you'll be called a sexist. If you criticize Israel, well, you're an anti-Semite. See, it's just a label. When you understand what that term is, when you understand that it's a form of mind control, see, they simplify everything down. Everything is broken down to a very base level. If you look at things, you step outside of everything. You look at it from an analytical point of view, and you start to look at things and let your brain do the work. All right, turn those computers on, ladies and gentlemen. You're all capable of this. Just because I'm a smart individual doesn't mean that I can do this. Well, you should just tune into Popeye because he'll tell you everything. No, your brain is a muscle. I suggest you work it and cause it to grow more fresh, healthy brain cells. Okay, it can happen. Do the research. Eat the proper foods, too. Anyway, I want you to exercise your brains. I don't want you to fall for this. So I want you to be able to look at this with an analytical viewpoint and understand that all of this is the same garbage, no matter where it's coming from. If it's coming from Israel, our government, and again, when I say Israel, it's not the Jews. It's not even the people of Israel. Yes, there are some people in there that I've played the audio where they're like, yes, we're fascist. You know, they should just clean Palestine off the map. Clean Gaza off, wipe it off completely, eradicate everyone, kill them all, who cares? There are people that have said very racist things. We have those individuals in our society here in America as well. Does that mean all Americans should be judged by that? No, because we're not all like that, just like all the people that live in Israel aren't like that. So I'm not referring to every single little person that lives in Israel. That's not what I'm referring to at all. Okay, I'm just trying to get the message across that it's the Israeli government, which, again, Tel Aviv, Rothschild Boulevard, any questions as to who actually controls and runs things? Do you really need to ask yourself any more questions about who runs things there? Rothschild Boulevard. By the way, same people that run and control things over here. Oh, look, a connection. Oh, and it's not anti-Semitic because, here you're not called an anti-Semite if you go against the government. What are you called? You're called a racist. Again, you'll be called sexist if it's a female president, if they get Hillary in. And they're already using that. If you're against Hillary, it's because you don't want a female to be president, which I've gone into that. That's just propaganda. More mind control, which is actually what the subject here of Hour 2 is. Propaganda, mind control, how the narrative is twisted, how television, sports are used to control your brain, all of it. Now, a lot of people are going to say, what do you mean how television and sports are used to control my brain? Even Snoring Dog here in the background, Monster's like, what do you mean, Dad? Television and sports used to control your brain? You would have think you've heard it enough, right? Anyway, how is it used to control your brain? Besides the obvious with the flicker rate and everything else, which we'll get into. And by the way, there's a lot of smart individuals out there in the world that do not want to own televisions. They won't have a television in their house. Gee, I wondered why. And these are people with very high IQs, backgrounds, college degrees, multiple degrees, very high up, some PhDs in some cases, and they won't have a television in their house. But I guess they're crazy tinfoil hatters. Whoa, you crazy tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist. Right, maybe they just know something that you should be paying attention to. How about that? There was a time that people thought the world was flat, too, and you were chastised. People were locked up because they said, well, the world is round, and it's not the center of the solar system. The sun is. The earth is not the center of all things? You mean man is not the center of everything? Ego, alert, ego. Anyway, let me see, we got about 20 minutes, so I got plenty of time here. I want to see which one I'm going to air first. I'm going to air one this segment and one this second because I want to be able to explain a little bit about both of them. So I think first what I'll do is I'll air how television and sports, the clip I have about how television and sports are used to manipulate. It's actually from one of Jones's movies. I believe it was Fall of the Republic. He was interviewing Alan Watt. And this, I have this section. It's like an 11-minute section, but I want you to hear this interview with Alan Watt. They sent out, and I can't remember who did it. It was probably Aaron that went over and interviewed him. I'll have to ask him. But it was probably Aaron Dykes that did it. Anyway, Alan Watt does this amazing explanation, and that's why I've played this before on air. He does this amazing explanation of how television and modern sports culture is used to control the masses. So I'll play that first, get that out of the way, and then I want to get into, in the second segment, I want to place a piece of audio for you and break it down from a man named Yuri Bezmenov. Now, I have the full interview that G. Edward Griffin did with him, and it was back in the 80s, if I remember correctly. I think it was like 1982, 1983, something around there. It's in the early 80s. And I have the full interview up on Federal Jack. What I'm going to do during the show, sometime probably during the break, or I'll find it eventually, I'm going to take the link for the full interview with him, and I'll post it in the chat room. So go over to truthfrequencyradio.com or go over to federaljack.com and go to the Down the Rabbit Hole Listen Live page, which is, if you go on the site, it's right in the right-hand side when you open the site, upper right-hand corner. If you click on the Listen Live page, which is the red one, I believe, yeah, the red one says Listen Live, it'll take you to the chat room. Same thing over in Truth Frequency. There's a Listen Live tab. Click that, and then it opens up a little drop-down that says Chat Room. Go in there. And if you go in the chat room, I always tell the listeners this. If you're listening live, this works. If you're not listening live, it'll get buried. So just listen to the title of the whatever I drop. But when I put it in the chat room, I'll let you guys know what the title is on Federal Jack for the listeners that hear in the archives or on YouTube or on a rebroad or wherever. You'll be able to look it up on Federal Jack. But for the people listening live right now at 11:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will drop the link into the chat eventually. And you can watch. It's like an hour and 21 minutes. Watch the whole thing. This is only a small, about 8.5 minute clip from it, and it's a couple pieces pieced together. So because he kind of went off on a tangent a little bit, but he had to explain his father and his background and everything else, because if he didn't, then you wouldn't be able to understand or fully comprehend what he was laying down. You get it? So I do encourage you to watch the full one, but the 8.5 minute clip is rather important. Anyway, I want to get to this other clip real quick first. As I said, it's Alan Watt. You can go find the whole movie, I'm sure, on YouTube. I think Change the Channel, our good buddy Ken Webb has it up on his channel. It's, was it Fall of the Republic? It was one of Jones's flicks. But he did his crew, not him, his crew did this amazing interview with Alan Watt. And Alan Watt breaks down in detail, but in very easy to understand language for everybody across the board, across the world, to understand how television is used. And believe me, if you're not in the United States and you think, well, that's just the U.S., wherever you are, if you're watching TV, you're being programmed too. That's why they want televisions all over the world. That's why they want people in little mud huts to have a TV and a signal, because that's their only outlet to the world. And if that's their only outlet, and that outlet can be filled with lies and garbage, well, then they just control everything now, don't they? So use your brains. I mean, it was introduced to us right back in the day. Not everybody had a TV. Think about it. Why would they want people that live in a small hut with leaky roofs and everything to still have a television? You see it all the time. Why is that? Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. Mind control works no matter what country you're in or what language you speak. As long as they understand the basics of how to tweak your brain and manipulate you, they will. With that being said, here's Alan Watt on how they being the powers that shouldn't be, they use television and sports to manipulate and to destroy our current culture. Again, if I remember correctly, this is from one of Jones's flicks, Fall of the Republic. Anyway, here we go. Mr. Alan Watt.
Bringing entertainment to thousands of people. Through its magic, we are able to enjoy a combination of the radio, motion pictures, and the stage, right in the comfort of our own homes, simply by pushing a button and turning a dial. These cells with their electrical charges are scanned by a stream of electrons, completing 30 pictures a second. Compare that crude picture with these of today, and you can judge for yourself how far along the road to perfection television has traveled.
Most people still today think that all entertainment to do with movies, drama, is therefore nothing more than their entertainment. It never ever was that case.
Of course, television can't perform such miracles as this, yet. But perhaps there's no harm wishing that it could.
The greatest social messages are promoted through movies and drama, high drama, through the fixation of emotive sequences, emotional sequences, not logical, factual sequences, but pushing points across in an emotional way which register and fix in the mind. So emotional content is very, very important, rather than going through an actual discussion or an argument using logic and facts. There's no debate. And when you're being downloaded through fiction. Your guard is down. The censor part of your brain is not in action. It isn't saying, yes, I agree with this, I disagree with that, as you would in a debate or a lecture. You're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with new ideas.
Throughout history, social engineers have refined techniques designed to control large populations.
About 100 years ago, this big organization with many branches, they wanted to rule the world basically using Britain as a nucleus of a system, an embryo, which also was going to be joined with the US under the Anglo-American establishment, wrote about the kind of culture and the changes of culture over a 100-year period that they would actually design, implement, and bring in. And H.G. Wells talked about it too. He talked about arenas. He says arenas could be put up across the world for sports, for instance. Now, at that time, sports was something that children, school children were into. Adults became adults and got onto adult things. So it was unimaginable at the time that people could actually believe that there was even a need for adult sports and entertainment, never mind having arenas built across the world. But he said we can do this and foist basically a sports culture for the males. Using a tribal system, we're all tribal to an extent. That's why we even bother to vote for a tribal leader. This is well understood. That's why we're supplied with these leaders. And because the average man was to become more disengaged from his own destiny, as the expert class arose, it was decided that the males would get their outlet, basically, gradually becoming helpless as males through sports. Therefore, they'd have a tribal team they could identify with. They could cheer them on as they were winning. In their own personal lives, they were getting nowhere. They were getting disenfranchised, in a sense, as experts took over decision-making for them in all kinds of fields. So this was psychology at use, planned before they even implemented the sports. When radio came along, of course, they used that to the maximum. Sports for the men, soaps basically for the women. And then in came television, as I say, with its alpha state, its hypnotic state. And sure enough, around the 1960s, really, 50s and 60s, it took off. It really, really took off. And men became glued on Saturday nights to the sports shows. A culture industry, which is called by its own the culture industry. The Soviet Union had a department called the culture industry. Their actors and directors were called the cultural leaders, because they would, like a computer, people are like computers, all you have to do is keep giving them new updates every so often, and you can change an entire country or a nation or a block of nations who are all getting the same upgrades at the same time along certain paths. Today we call it political correctness. Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbors and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense, as long as everyone agrees at the same time. You'll say, well, I'm sane, and your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them.
But they've been programmed. And I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take an interest, a serious interest in world affairs, to take a serious interest in what their elected officials are doing. And they're not going to be really inclined to study or discover the deception that's being used against them. And so I'm sad because I see all of that in a flash in my mind as being an indication of how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
The scientific dictatorship understands what makes human beings tick. They understand our psychology. They've studied it, and they're using it against us. But the minute the public awakens to the fact that there is an agenda to manipulate them, and the second the public realizes that they are being conditioned and controlled, the establishment begins to lose that edge they've got over people. So all I ask viewers to do is to think for themselves and to study public relations, to study advertising, to study propaganda, and to realize how much of it is out there in their daily lives. And then make the decision for yourself. I just want people to think on their own and to not have their decisions and their thoughts and their ideas prepackaged and basically downloaded into them.
If it's on TV and a famous face says something, then it must be true. He doesn't have to show you facts or anything else. You've been brought up with these faces. That's why they keep these guys on television into their 70s and 80s. You've grown up with this father figure who's on television every night at 6 o'clock, in your house, in your room, staring right at you, and he's a father figure. Would he tell you a lie? So you naturally never suspect him. And this same man will lead you through new topics. He'll introduce experts on the topics. They'll have a little summary at the end of every talk, and you are now left with the conclusion that's presented to you. You don't arrive at it, it's given to you, and it's good enough for you.
When I was growing up, people were talking on their front porches, neighbors were playing baseball, there were nightly barbecues. You don't see that anymore. We've lost our communities. You drive through neighborhoods, you see the blue glow of television sets. We're losing our humanity. So if you want to rebel against the globalists, the social engineers, start by turning the TV off a few hours a day and actually getting to know your neighbors, getting outside that comfort zone, expanding your horizons. By coming together as communities, by getting to know our neighbors, we defeat the social engineers.
We're programmed today perfectly, just like machines.
This is the best day of my life!
We tie this in with the Brzezinski. Brzezinski said in 2 Ages. Now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. He was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. He says, eventually they'll be unable to think or reason for themselves. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them. Well, that's happened today. That's why people today can't think outside of the programming from television.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, Obama's main foreign policy advisor, talks about how a cult of personality can be artificially manufactured to influence the masses.
In the first months of my administration, to pull our economy... Oh, goodness. Sorry about that, guys. To pull our economy back from the brink, including the largest and most sweeping economic recovery plan in our nation's history.
We're gullible, but we're also willingly gullible. We want a human being, a big daddy, to come along and make everything right for us. And as long as we believe that, we'll always basically get shafted.
In addition to John, sorry, I just noticed that I jumped the gun here. Go ahead and move it up. I'd already introduced all you guys.
It's the presidential reality show. But when it became an Oprah production, it became slick. You don't have a president. You have an actor. They say that politics is show business for ugly people. You got it.
What am I going to tell the president when I tell him his teleprompter is broken? What will he do then?
That's right, Vice President, war criminal Joe Biden. What will he do then? I have a better question for you. It's one that Luke Radowski asked you, I don't know, probably, 6 years ago now? 6 years, 7 years ago? Somewhere around there, maybe a little less. Between 5 and 7 years ago. How come you were meeting with, when you guys were meeting with General Mahmoud Ahmad on the morning of 9/11, the very man who had wired $100,000 to the quote-unquote ringleader of the 9/11 hijackers, Mohammed Atta. He had wired him a couple days before $100,000. The head of the Pakistani ISI, who wired $100,000 to the supposed 9/11 hijackers a few days before the events that took place on 9/11 occurred. You're meeting with him on the morning of 9/11, and it's a diplomatic thing, is what you told Luke. Well, we didn't arrest Khrushchev when he came here, but this guy had just wired money to the hijackers, and it's come out. There's reports on this. It's come out. I mean, it's been in congressional testimony. This isn't like conspiracy theorist tinfoil hattery. Okay, this is conspiracy fact that this actually happened. And you can see Luke Rudowski, the videos on, it was in another one of Jones's flicks, but you see Luke confront them, and he makes fun of Luke and laughs it off, kind of tells him to go away. And Luke asks a valid question. What were you doing with him on the morning of 9/11? This guy was wiring money to Mohammed Atta, one of the ringleaders of the supposed 9/11 hijackers, and you're wiring him money. But hey, everybody should go out and buy a shotgun, right? No one needs an AR-15, Joe. Everybody should go buy a shotgun. And then people listen to you, and we're committing crimes with shotguns. Well done, Mr. Vice President. Well done. Golf clap for you, sir. Maybe you could just answer that question that Luke asked you all those years ago. What were you doing on the morning of 9/11 with General Mahmoud Ahmed, the former head of the Pakistani ISI? Again, the man who wired $100,000 to Mohammed Atta a few days before 9/11. Sir, you have a few things to answer for. Not the least what you've been a part of behind the scenes or even out in front the past 8 years while your buddy's been the president and you've been the vice president, but before when you were a senator and anything else shady you've been involved in. I mean, you really need to be run through the grill, sir. You are one shady individual. Yes, Joe Biden to the woodshed for a second there. That was an impromptu Joe Biden woodshedding. I can't stand him. He plays stupid and he does come off like he puts his foot in his mouth, and he does put his foot in his mouth. But, he kind of reminds me of Gerald Ford when Gerald Ford was the president, because Gerald Ford kind of put off this bumbling, fall-down, moronic, and the media made fun of him. But if you actually research Gerald Ford, he's actually a much more disgusting individual behind the scenes, like what he was involved in, the things he was connected to business-wise, and the like. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think it was Kathy O'Brien that mentioned him in her book. I think it was Kathy, Transformation of America. And I mean, you can research other people, and you'll see that other people have said some of the same things. So you could either say that they're liars and Gerald Ford was just a bumbling fool, or perhaps the bumbling fool was just an act, so that you didn't see how evil the person was behind the mask. I mean, Cheney was just so evil it just comes out. I mean, that guy's so evil he didn't have a heart for 2 years and still lived. He had a pump run off the Energizer battery. And he still lived. No pulse for 2 years, and Vader still lived. Any questions? Didn't think so. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Yuri Bezmenov coming up. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment here. So getting back into it, as I was discussing the mind control brainwashing that goes on as I played the clip in the last segment. Again, I urge you to go. You can find it on YouTube, actually. Just go to YouTube. You can watch the visual with it. If you go to YouTube and type in, I'll tell you what the name of it is in a second. It's How Television and Sports Are Being Used to Manipulate and Destroy the Republic. And the clip's up on YouTube. There's like multiple people have re-uploaded it over the years. So it's this 11-minute segment, and I always play it. It's a very important part. You can go watch the whole movie. If I remember correctly, it was from Fall of the Republic that Alex Jones did. Go over to Ken Webb's channel, change the channel. He's got all of his movies over there. You can watch it for free on YouTube, if you want to see the whole thing. But that's the title of the clip, again, is How Television and Sports Are Being Used to Manipulate and Destroy the Republic. It's also on Federal Jack. You can look it up in the federaljack.com search bar, How Television and Sports Are Being Used to Manipulate, and that'll bring up the video. The piece of audio I'm going to play now is from about an hour and a half long interview that G. Edward Griffin did back in 1985 with a man named Yuri Bezmenov. He was a former KGB agent who was trained in subversion techniques. And he explains the 4 basic steps to social engineering and socially engineering an entire generation or generations, multiple, into thinking and behaving the way that the powers that shouldn't be want them to. And as I said in the write-up on Federal Jack, I put in the last line here, I put, it's shocking because our nation has been transformed in the exact same way and followed the exact same steps, and it has been. So you can go to federaljack.com in the search bar. If you're listening on the archives later on, Raybroad, YouTube, you downloaded it and you're in your car going to work, whatever. Former KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov explains how to brainwash a nation. Yuri's name is spelled Y-U-R-I. That's his first name, and his last name is B-E-Z-M-E-N-O-V. Again, the title is Former KGB Agent Yuri Bezmenov Explains How to Brainwash a Nation. I will drop the link in the chat. I already did. I'm going to tweet it out, and I will put it on Facebook again. I actually have a meme I made for this on Facebook, and it's been shared a bunch of times all over the place, and I'll put this out there again because this is important info. I couldn't repeat this enough because as much as we talk about this, there are still people out there that engage in falling prey to this type of stuff, and they will buy into mind control once in a while, depending on what it is, even if they don't realize that they're falling into it, and it happens. So, and we get new listeners all the time that maybe just tuned in. This is the first week or first time they're even hearing my broadcast, and they're like, whoa. So it's important to go over this and reiterate this stuff as much as possible until people understand it. It's like, I look at my radio show not like a radio show. You all know this, to the older listeners, anybody that's been listening to me, you know that I consider my radio broadcast to be more so of like making history class cool and fun and going over stuff that you're not told and bringing guest speakers into history class or whatnot. I don't like to look at this like an entertainment thing. It's here for your educational value whenever. So you can, by the way, you can always go over to Truth Frequency Radio. My archives are there, and if you want my full archives going back to when I first started doing radio, they're all posted over at federaljack.com in the radio archive section. In fact, if you go to there's two ways to get to it. In the top, it says DTRH Radio Archives, or if you go into the download section, there's a button in the download section, which, by the way, the download section has all these videos, the mind control videos that I'm playing tonight, that how to manipulate, how they use sports to manipulate, and the piece from Yuri Bezmenov, and the entire full video of Yuri is in my mind control section under the downloadable archive section. So you can go to federaljack.com right now. You can download the video to your computer for free. I don't charge for it. It's that's one of the services of Federal Jack. It's a huge archive of information. You go in there, you go in the downloadable archive section. There's a bunch of different pictures with going to different sections, like a war section, my radio archive section, JFK 9/11. There's one that says mind control. Click on it. I know these two videos are in there because I put them in there. I built that whole thing myself. So look up How Television and Sports. That should bring up the link for that one. And then look up, the other one you should look up is How to Brainwash a Nation. And in fact, you might even find where it says former KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov. Try to look for those because the mind control section is pretty big. I will scroll through it myself with the videos playing and try to find the links for these two videos that I'm currently playing right now, so you can download them yourself. And if I can find them while I'm doing this, I'll drop them in the chat. Either way, you can go over to the mind control section yourself and peruse through it, and you'll see there's a ton of other videos in there too. Anything in the downloadable archive section, I encourage you to please download and take. Get a spare hard drive. Go out and buy a hard drive. 1 gig hard drives are not that expensive anymore. I mean, I used to do the service. I still do it if people want me to, but because the hard drives, more people understand how to get stuff now, on being 6 years on now. I used to sell the hard drives loaded with everything I have. So if you want copies of everything I have, well, then you have to go. You can go to the Federal Jack store, and there's a thing I do where you buy the hard drive. You pay for it. I go pick up the hard drive, and then I load it up and mail it to you. But if you can do all this yourself, a lot of the stuff that I have, not all of it, but a decent amount of it, I would say probably about 30% of what I have is up on the website. There's not enough room on my server to put everything I have. I would need like 2 separate servers just for the download section. It's ridiculous. Anyway, trust me, I already crashed the site because I had it loaded with too much stuff. So go get like a 1 gig hard drive, go over to the download section on Federal Jack, and just systematically download all the videos. Copy everything. Okay, the key to winning this is education and waking people up. Okay, showing them information, giving them information that they do not have. That's the only reason why the people that are quote-unquote in charge are in charge. The reason why they're relevant is because they have access to info that you and I don't. As soon as you and I have access to the same info, poof, their relevance goes away because now you don't have to look up to them to be your savior. Wow, with the proper knowledge, look what I'm capable of. Humanity's been collectively told that we're stupid and we're idiots and that we can't handle this. So we walk around like, okay, we can't handle it. They're smarter than us. No, they're not, okay? The reason why they can control us is because they've got us thinking that they're smarter than us. And that's part of this mind control and manipulation. That's why you need to go do your education. You need to go, yourself. You need to educate yourself. You need to wake yourself up. You need to literally educate yourself first before you can even, stand a chance of talking to other people about this. Because that's what happens when people, they get truth or vomit. They just puke, 9/11 was an inside job, HARP, oh my God, blah, 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 and they all over people, chemtrail, blah. And then people are like, oh, too much information at once. It's information overload, and you turn them off. And a lot of the times the stuff that you're talking about, you might not be fully knowledgeable about. You're only scraping the surface. You're not really in depth. And if you take somebody on that might know something or that might have been fed a deeper level of propaganda and you can't go up against that, okay, that creates an issue for you. You get it? So you need to do the research yourself. That's why I encourage you, just get a hard drive, go over to the download section and download everything. And then pass it out. Tell your friends about it. Hey, go download this stuff. All my shows are there too. Download them. That's why they're there. There's no membership fee or anything. Take it. Please. Go look at the Reality of War archive. There's videos in there of Libyan war crimes, stuff that they tried taking down when we had Obama's Libya, if anybody's ever heard of that site. Okay, you'll hear an interview talking about that and the people that got us those videos coming up. But anyway, go to the Reality of War archive, download everything there. Just go to the whole archive section, and section by section, just download everything. Go get like a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive so you have enough space, and then go get like a YouTube downloading program and start backing up videos. Start backing up videos off of Vimeo, Livestream, anything, Live Leak. Anything that you think should be recorded and archived, become archivists. Don't leave it up to 1 or 2 people. Well, we have one library in the world. No, we need to have 10,000 versions of the Library of Alexandria. Okay, that's what we need. We need like 10,000 versions of that, not just one digital version. We need people all over the world creating their own. That's how the truth is going to remain floating around. That's how propaganda can get stopped. Because if the only thing floating around the atmosphere in society is the propaganda and not the truth, then, well, there you have it. Because that's the only thing floating around. But if you can get past that, if you can actually have this information out there so much, well, then you have more and more people waking up. And, oh, that's what you see. Compared to 2006, when I first got into this, to now, it's an amazing difference. And we had hope for what we see now back then, and this gives me hope for what I see in the future. That's why I always tell you, the light at the end of the tunnel is you and me. We will get there. We're going to win. I can see it. You can see it. What did Gandhi say? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. We're in stage 3, where they're fighting us. So you win is stage 4. We're almost there. We need to enlighten ourselves. Now, with that in mind, let's get to the video of Yuri Bezmenov and G.A. Griffin. This is, again, from 1985, ladies and gentlemen, back in 1985. And just listen, this is still going on today. But you can only imagine. He says it was we were in danger in 1985, and look where we are now.
Our conversation is with Mr. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So the next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kinds of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in the United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. It's divided in 4 basic stages: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. They will be lined up against the wall and shot.
You can go watch the entire video, again, over at federaljack.com. I dropped the link in the chat room. Let me see if I still have it open. No, of course I do not. It's just type in, go over to federaljack.com and just type in former KGB agent Yuri. Just former KGB agent Yuri, and it'll be the first link that comes up. Or just actually, if you type in Yuri, Y-U-R-I, it's the first link that comes up. Click on it, and that's the full page. In fact, I noticed on the page that the links to download the videos, because I do have them in the mind control section, I found them, are not there. I thought I put them in there and they're not, so I'll add that. So if you find the video, underneath the 2 videos, I'll put links so you can download the first video I played tonight, and I'll also put a link to download the full Yuri Bezmenov video, which is what I have up on Federal Jack in the mind control section. Again, easiest way to remember it, just like my radio archives section, easiest way to remember it is federaljack.com/Popeye. Make it very simple. Federaljack.com/Popeye for the Down the Rabbit Hole radio archive section. Well, for each of the downloadable sections, I made it very easy to remember the URL. So for the mind control one, it's federaljack.com/mind control. Have fun. It's a researcher's wet dream when it comes to information about mind control. There's a ton of stuff in there. Some of it you might have seen, some of it you might not have seen. I put as much information about mind control in there as I possibly could so that you could judge for yourself. I mean, again, I want you to realize that I wouldn't lie to you, but I don't want you to think that, well, he said it because Popeye said it, he said it, and that's it. So, no, don't think that. Again, I will drop right now into the chat room the link for it, federaljack.com/mind control. Very easy to remember, federaljack.com/mind control. Once you're in there, if you want the 2 videos I played tonight, scroll down to the bottom. It's one of the last ones on the list. In fact, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom up. It's titled Yuri Bezmenov, ex-KGB, How to Brainwash America. You can download it. It's in WMV format. I encourage you to take it. And then if you scroll upwards, I will tell you, if you go to the H section, you will see how TV and sports are being used to manipulate and destroy humanity. Again, how TV and sports are being used to manipulate and destroy humanity. It's the first one in the under H. In fact, it's right under Fritz Springmeier. You can't miss it. So how TV and sports are being used to manipulate and destroy humanity. Again, that's in WMV format as well, Windows Media, so you should be able to watch it. Download it, and I encourage you to re-upload them to YouTube if you can. If you have a YouTube account, go ahead. Anything that you download out of there, be careful with some of it because you want to make sure that there's no copyright on some of it. I believe everything up there is copyright free. I try to keep it that way, but that way I don't have any issues. But whatever you find mostly on there, you should be able to upload to YouTube. Just be careful because YouTube's a bunch of pricks, and you know that anyway. But feel free to disseminate the information to other people. I encourage you to. I didn't put it up there so you can strictly go to federaljack.com. I mean, we need 100 versions of my downloadable archive section. I need all of you to do this, and the world needs you to do it. It's not just me. You want to save humanity, you want to take an active part in saving it, then help me. Let's go. Let's get her done. And there's a bunch of stuff in there. Again, there's a reality of war section. There in the download section, there's a miscellaneous video section, which has just a bunch of different stuff in there. I have to add, I have a police state section. I also have a police brutality section. I had like 3 different sections, and they were so big, I had to kind of put them together and narrow some of the videos down. So I can't. There's still 2 archives that I haven't finished putting together that I have to make public. But there's a police state one in there. There's mind control, gun control. There's brutality of war, and this is off the top of my head. Miscellaneous, 9/11, JFK, and my downloadable archive section for the radio show, where it's got all of my shows. Special broadcasts that I did, podcasts that might not have been released on air, but were done, strictly for YouTube or whatnot. All that stuff is there. Take it. It's there for free. I don't get paid for doing this. I do this service for you all, so you all have the same level of knowledge that I do. That way we kind of have an even playing field with these pricks. Okay? Like Fletcher Prouty said when asked why he did what he did and why he spoke out, because he knew where the line was. And they said, well, why do you even bother putting your family in any sort of danger and speaking out? You could just shut your mouth and you could live to your happy old days. And Fletcher said, well, I want to level the playing field. That's what he told Leno Senek, and that's what he told others when asked that question. I want to level the playing field. He knew it was dangerous. He knew he could have been killed for what he said, but he knew where the line was. But the reason he spoke out was because he wanted to level the playing field. Well, under that same thinking, I want to level the playing field. I want humanity to all be on the same level. Because if we realize, once we're mentally all on the same level, and I don't mean down in base level thinking, we need to evolve out of that, then things like war, we'll realize how stupid and pointless it is. Famine, well, famine and stuff and poverty, that'll get eradicated too, because we'll realize that, maybe instead of wasting all this money blowing each other up, we could waste the same amount of money helping each other out, and the world as a whole would be a better place. And then maybe we can explore the oceans, and we can start to reach out to the stars, and then maybe the whatever's out there will come back and be like, okay, you guys are a little more elevated now. Who knows? But we can't even get to that level until we have to get out of this level of base knowledge, base thinking. And the only way you're going to do that is if you go research for yourself. And then you have conversations. Don't be afraid to approach your neighbor, talk to others, and say, hey, there's some important stuff. Give them Federal Jack business cards. Tell them about Truth Frequency Radio. You can get, Chris offers there's a link on Truth Frequency Radio. You can click on it and you can get a free bumper sticker from the bumper sticker company. I can't remember the name of the bumper sticker company that he uses off the top of my head right now for some reason. But you get my point. There's ways to spread the information. Tell people about the radio show. Tell people about Federal Jack. Tell people about Down the Rabbit Hole. Tell people about Truth Frequency in general and all the other great shows on the network. Don't be afraid to speak truth to power. Stand up. It's time to sack up and do something. Don't worry about criticism. Oh, someone might think I'm a dick. Who cares? Who cares what they think?
This is Sparta!
That's right, Leonidas. And that means it's time to go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Educate yourself. Go to the downloadable section over on federaljack.com. Federaljack.com. Check it out. Down the rabbit hole, archive section, mind control, and more. JFK. Research, research, research. You're your own superhero. I know you are. I have faith in you. The solutions to our problems are an inside job, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all. I am out of here.